Hi, good evening. My name is David Campbell, and I'm the founder of the organization that's been referred to a few times called All Hands Volunteers. Let me give you just 1 minute of background on All Hands, and then I'll ask our different speakers to come up and join me, and so we can have a Q&A session. So, you folks, Mayor Toda-san and Laura, Andrew and Ken, please join me. I came to Boston 20 years ago to be president of an organization here called Bolt, Brannick & Newman, BBN, in Cambridge, which was the company that had much to do with the development of the internet. That experience led me, when Andrew referred to the 2004 tsunami, I had the question of who would think of using the internet from the middle of that largest disaster that occurred in my lifetime. I went to Thailand. Along with other many things we discovered at that point in time was there were people who wanted to come and help after disasters, and they came there by the dozens and then by the hundreds, and we discovered a vehicle to organize those people. The phrase that was used for them was SUVs, but in this case it was spontaneous, unaffiliated volunteers. Many people said stay home, but once they came, we learned how to manage them. 8 months after that, when Katrina happened, we incorporated here in Boston as a 501c3 and responded and had 1,500 people go down and help after Katrina. That model had us very active, and in fact, on March 11th, I was in the Miami airport on my way to our project in Haiti, where we had over 2,000 people come down and work in Haiti over 2 years. But when we saw the news of this tremendous earthquake and tsunami, myself and our key operations director, Mark Young, changed our flights and flew directly the next day from Miami and landed in Tokyo on March 14th. We worked for a bit in organizing our way to move up into the area, and had the tremendous good fortune to meet Mayor Toda-san, and with his warmth and openness allowed us to initiate a project there. I mean, as a side note, in terms of other things that have gone on with All Hands since, we have active projects today in Nepal, where we have over 100 people on the ground, the Philippines, which was hit by a massive typhoon, Haiyan, Fiji, which you may know got hit by a Category 5 cyclone only 30 days ago, and projects in Missouri and South Carolina in terms of U.S. activity. But the Ofunato one had a very special connection, and one of the things that we've discovered in our model is that people who have a desire to go to help and will move there bring a certain confidence and a network of connections and trust. Ofunato was extraordinary, because some of the volunteers that came to our project included people like Atsuko Fish. And so when Atsuko came with her daughter Emily and could be in Ofunato and connect directly with the people there and understand the need, and then with her passion and eloquence, bring that message back to Boston, it helped crystallize what's been 5 years of support, for the people that were affected by this great earthquake. Laura came up also originally as part of that volunteer team, and working in the U.S. Embassy at that time brought back the message of both need and the ability to connect, which led people from the embassy to come up, which eventually led Ambassador John Roos to come up. And that helped be a pivotal event in, again, cementing this unusual connection. But it was particularly the relationship of trust with Toda-san, who we have tremendous affection and respect for. And it's important to think back to another Boston connection, because the mayor is here today 30 years after he was here at Harvard, where he came as part of his working at that time in the international construction industry to take a program management course at Harvard. And I don't think that's the only reason he let us stay and talk, but it helped that he had been in Boston, he had been at Harvard, and when we came to speak, he gave us a little extra time to think and listen to him. It's important to recognize how special it is for a person who's gone through those demands. Again, retired from his corporate job at about age 60, and 90 days after being mayor, gets hit with this devastating event. For him to take his time to be with us, for him, frankly, to have delivered his remarks in English for our benefit, to have a presentation that so clearly lays out the challenges they faced and how effectively they dealt with it, I think, frankly, is a tremendous honor for us. And so on behalf of all of us, thank you for that investment. It's a wonderful organization of tonight of people who are here and available to take questions from you on anything you'd be interested in terms of what they experienced in addition to what they've shared. I plan to initiate that conversation just by asking a question of each to start the process, but we really are open to your questions, and so think of them and we'll be ready for you in a moment. But the first I wanted to really ask is the mayor, and the presentation is extraordinarily comprehensive, and really it's a twofold. What do you believe allowed you to be so effective in creating plans that got Ofunato moving more rapidly than other cities? And part of that, what advice would you give to mayors of other cities? Is it possible to prepare for events like the Great Tsunami?
Okay. Regarding the first question, I have 5 points of view. One is that I aimed upon 3.11 tsunami. I aimed to make a reconstruction plan early time. My target time was before autumn. And second is that during the preparing time of reconstruction plan, I heard the citizens' voice 2 times. In Ofunato, there are 12 districts. So 12 districts multiply 2 rounds, that means 24 times. And the first round, when I explained the fundamental consideration for reconstruction plan. Action was that, please make project quickly. And when second round, after reconstruction plan is almost completed, their action was, when you are going to start project, so always pushed. Number 3 is, upon reconstruction plan is finalized, every month I have been carrying out review meeting together with major division managers in City Hall. And number 4 item is, before I became mayor, my election promise was that main purpose is to vitalize the local economy. But 3 months and 1 week later, suddenly tsunami happened, so I shifted myself to reconstruction shift. And number 5th, as I explained in the PowerPoint, as reconstruction progresses, my heart becomes, what would be the success of reconstruction? Then I come back to my own original election promise of, that is to vitalize the economy, or to keep our economy vitalized, vital. This is the first question, my answer. And second question is, I have 3 points. One is, mayor should have clear idea what to do as a mayor. What to do as a mayor. I want to be a mayor. No good. Of course. Second is, enough communication with City Hall major manager staffs, so that they can understand my point of view, my thinking what to do, and repeatedly to communicate. And for communication, not verbal communication is not enough. As far as I communicate 1 week, one time with particular meeting with major staffs, I normally utilize in memo. My message is written in memo so that they can understand fully what Mr. Toda think about it. Already 5 years and 4 months has passed since the 3.11, and I issued already 290 times. So as time passes, longer, my consideration or my main idea, my staff can understand more deeper and deeper. So I would say these 3 points.
There's a single indication of success as to whether or not the mayor did a great job. He was elected and took office in December of 2010, and in Japan, mayor's terms are 4 years. So the good news for Ofunato is the mayor was re-elected. Sort of the, in a simple world, an ultimate measure. Congratulations. Laura, next in line. What started the TOMODACHI initiative? How did that take place? How did that get initiated?
Sure, thank you. You know, the origins actually have to do with some people in this room sitting to my left as well. So you saw in the video, for those of you who are here at the very beginning of this event tonight, a bit about Operation Tomodachi. Tomodachi means friends in Japanese, friendship. And there was a military collaboration in which the US military helped the Japan Self-Defense Forces to the tune of about 20,000 US troops coming and assisting. And that had a very distinct time period of March through June 2011. And when that concluded, it was seen as a tremendously successful collaboration between Japan and the United States, and it resulted in a lot of goodwill between the two countries, which frankly relations had been a bit strained before then. And then at that time, the US government, where I happened to be doing a fellowship in the embassy and had just arrived in January 2011, said we want to do something to continue to help the region for the longer term. And I, as David had mentioned, and had the personal opportunity of volunteering with All Hands Volunteers early on after the disaster, and when we were staying in one of the evacuation centers, I remember distinctly when Mayor Toda came to visit and see all these international volunteers who had come to help, and he was so welcoming of the international community. And so when Ambassador Roos, then ambassador at the time, felt that the immediate nuclear crisis was in a stage that he felt comfortable going up, leaving his post in Tokyo to go up to the region and do an investigation and see where things were going. We helped put together a trip to Ofunato and to Ricus and Takata, and he met with both mayors and asked the question, what can the United States do to continue to help now that this military operation is over? And one of the messages that came out of that visit was, you can help provide opportunities to our young people. And you touched upon this in your remarks earlier, but the need for opportunity and future engagement and entrepreneurship. And so TOMODACHI, the initiative, has since then been supporting people-to-people exchanges between young people in Japan and the United States, the high school, college, and young professional level, to the tune of about 1,500 young people per year in each of the last 5 years. And we have programs ongoing through 2020, and I'm really happy that a little later on this evening, you're going to hear from 4 TOMODACHI young people who will be performing. They're at the Berklee College of Music, thanks to the support of Suntory, and TOMODACHI has been very grateful for the support of many corporate supporters, and we've raised over $40 million since the tsunami. And so we're really, it's an initiative that's here to stay, a great story of hope and something positive coming out of this terrible tragedy. And so we appreciate everyone who's helped to make that happen through financial support and opening your homes and things like that. So that's a bit about the start of Tomodachi. Thank you.
Thanks, Laura. Yeah. So Andrew, thank you for introducing the digital archives to us. I was particularly pleased to see that All Hands is in there. I didn't know that, so thank you for that. What else would you like to share? What do you think the impact's been of the digital archives, and what have you learned from doing the project that you think would be of interest, to people?
Right, thanks for that question. First, let me add to what Laura just said, that one very welcome additional exchange is just coming up next Sunday. That is a week from this coming Sunday. So a little advertisement. The Fukushima Youth Sinfonietta is coming to Boston. Yeah. That'll add 60 to that'll be 60 of the 1,500 this year, I guess. Junior high school and high school students in a youth orchestra, plus world-class professional musicians together. And we've, on 3 months' notice, thanks to the work of many people, including the Consul General, gotten Symphony Hall as a venue. So these young people get to play a concert in the Symphony Hall. It's quite extraordinary. There's plenty of tickets. April 3rd, 8 p.m. You should all come. That's also something you can do to support the ongoing recovery, because these are young people whose lives were harshly impacted by having to relocate away from their homes, and the orchestra gave them a way to come together. But let me answer your question, of course. The funny thing is that I've been so busy building the archive that I haven't had enough time to learn from it. So that is, I haven't had enough time to read what's in it. But I have learned some things from the process of pulling it together, and a bit from the visits to meet with people and ask them to share their materials. And so maybe just a couple things. One, how extraordinarily varied, even along the coast, this experience is. It's partly because the geography is so different along the coastline. Some places are flat, some places have mountains coming almost right down to the water. The first time I went was in the fall of 2011, and actually spent a day with some Japanese colleagues driving from Kamaishi in the north, this is all part of Iwate, to Ofunato and to Kesenuma, and Rikuzen Takata. So down the coast, stopping about an hour in each place. And they were so different, just physically they were so different, and the character of the tsunami. So there's not just one, what I learned through pulling together this material is that there's not just one event. There's very different impacts, and so there are very different issues that different communities have to deal with. And so there's not one stop shopping for planning and plans and solutions either. And the second thing I learned, and this is more in the collection of the material, is that we use the word compound disaster because there's first an earthquake, then a tsunami, then a nuclear meltdown, a nuclear disaster. But the word compound suggests that they're sort of layered together. But I think they're very different. They're essentially two disasters that don't talk to each other. One is the coastal disaster, and one is the Fukushima disaster. And they don't talk to each other because in one, people lost their homes and physically and had to figure out how and where to rebuild. And for the others, the homes are fine. There's no damage except for a teeny part of Fukushima along the coast. Everything's still there. It's just that nobody can live there. And so they have to go live in other places. And that's such a different, and it's actually in many ways harder, even though the physical damage is less, because you're cut off from your community and people don't want to talk about it either. So we have lots of information about Fukushima in our archive, but we have far fewer voices from Fukushima because it's harder for people to talk about. And we have more voices from the coastal disaster. So I've learned that there are really there are numerous disaster situations along the coast or recovery situations, but there are also two quite distinct events that require different ways of thinking, I think.
That's interesting. I mean, obviously I've spent a lot of time in disasters in the last 10 years in places around the world, and the multiple years of repercussions of disasters. One thing, we had a meeting this morning with the mayor, and one of the things that, again, I was impressed by among so many things is that if you think about, number one, the impact on the community of the devastation, and obviously the need, as they've done an extraordinary job of real estate planning, then there's the step up of activity of construction but he's already anticipating when that will stop and what will pick up the economy after that. So it's quite different segments which need very different levels of planning. First thing, obviously, to address any problem is to be aware of the fact that it's going to happen. And again, I think that's, your foresight has been admirable in that regard. So, Ken, what should people take away from the experience of Tohoku from your perspective?
Well, I think, I have a whole career looking at radioisotopes in the ocean, studying with Chernobyl, the fallout that was there before, other small sources. And so for me, it was no surprise that there would be more radioactivity after this had happened, and there's a good question of how much. But I think for a public who doesn't think about radioactive exposure, realizing that when you're flying to Japan, you're getting exposed to a lot more radioactivity than perhaps the visit you just took in that area, you need to get some information. Realizing we live in this radioactive world, there's different sources, and they all have different effects, even though you can't taste or smell or feel your dose. And so, at the end of the day, we responded, we helped the Japanese discover what had happened, how much was there. And it was really kind of, I'd say the public and government responses that were kind of surprising to me. There was often kind of a dismissive attitude, and it comes out of, we have it in the US, our government's nuclear power industries in Japan. Don't worry about it, it'll be fine, it's low. But of course, you're concerned, right? You hear from someone like me, there's cesium in your fish, there's cesium in drinking water, there's strontium, plutonium, many isotopes. And so it doesn't really help to be dismissive because people have a concern. But I showed you numbers up there of 2 or 3 in these units. That's really not going to stop me from eating fish or swimming in the ocean. So we have to know there's these different gradients, but the response shouldn't be don't worry about it or deny that there's a release into the ocean. It should be admitting that. And that's one group that I find very frustrating to work with, even though I'll give the same talk to them and they appreciate the work. That second group is kind of, it's almost an easier thing to do is scare people. I really try to tell people, if I'm speaking to anti-nuclear groups particularly, you can be against nuclear power, but don't scare people from swimming off Malibu Beach in California, that type of thing. It's very easy to attribute, you see a dead seal on the California coast, a whale, and you say it's because of Fukushima. There's still reports going on. I get daily questions from people about what's the cause of a particular die-off on the West Coast. Well, there's many climate reasons, many ecological reasons. It's not because of Fukushima Daiichi radioactivity. I can measure those levels, but it's very easy for people to start to believe these things because of this lack of understanding the difference between when you should be concerned, when you have millions of these becquerels in your seawater or drinking water, and we have 1 or 2 that's everywhere. And we have also natural sources. So I think we just have to be careful in this field and maybe as a response, not think just about decommissioning and cleanup on land, but more about public education. And whenever I see these big numbers of the hundreds of millions of dollars for building something like an ice dam or whatever, I think if they could just spend 1/10 of 1% on talking to people, getting them better informed, we could all learn from it and have a better response for public and don't scare people unnecessarily, but truly warn people when they shouldn't be in certain areas. So it's kind of those are the lessons that I guess I took out of it as much as the science.
Okay. I do remember being in Tokyo and people saying you picked up more radiation on the flight over than you're likely to get being in Tokyo at that point in time. So it was somewhat comforting. So from the audience, you've got an unusual level of expertise available to be candid and open to anything you'd like to add. Sir.
What's the distance that people should not go back to? What's the distance that people should not go back to the power plant for living?
Ken?
It's a combination of distance and direction. So there were certain directions of wind and rain patterns, particularly kind of in the north and west where the fallout was higher. And some of those areas are closed, not just because of distance, because of the direction that fallout went. They're trying to reduce a level of exposure to something that's a few times higher than what you would have been exposed to had you lived there before. But this is kind of something that's very difficult to say. There is no threshold below which there's no health effect from radiation. So when do you think the risk of additional cancer is acceptable? Governments have to set these limits. And often what they're dealing with are maybe imperfect science on how much is there, but we know that pretty well, but less on these low-level health effects, which you can't measure in a population when a third of us will get cancer in our lifetimes. How do you set a limit that might increase your cancer by 1 in 20,000? Another set of 30% is 30.0001 or something like that. Is that acceptable to you? People can make those choices. So getting back to your question, I guess, for different groups, they're going to have different risks that they're comfortable with, and I think we have to acknowledge that. And so a mother and a child might not want to move back to an area and grow produce and live in an area, even if it's only slightly contaminated, whereas I might go in and work every day there because I'm not concerned about that level of exposure. So there's no single answer. That's one way to look at it. Good to say.
Okay. Sir. You, yep, gotcha. I'm a little cross-eyed.
Hello. In what ways are you guys counteracting misconceptions about the situation and the nuclear disaster? Because I feel like a lot of people are still not aware of the nuclear crisis, and there's a lot of confusion about that. And how are you making it more aware to the public? Are there any counteractions for that?
Ken, I think you're still on.
Well, one thing that kind of came to me, partly out of frustration for finding government funding, was crowdsourcing, getting people engaged, collecting those ocean samples. It's very easy to get 20 liters, 5 gallons of water and send it. And then when people get engaged in something like that, we've had something like 450 people involved in fundraising, 250 in collecting, but the impressive number is 400,000 people coming to a website to learn about ocean radioactivity. And so it's getting information out there in accessible form so they can kind of learn for themselves, in this case, about oceans and radioactivity. But I think finding different ways to reach the public is something I'm trying to do more of. And I talk to the scientist all I want, and I do that, but it's really translating that into digestible forms that much more work is needed and more people need to be involved. Sometimes it's hard to do, though, without support, and a few dollars at a time is a difficult way to do science for our end. But
I think people appreciate your being here tonight. And so everyone here should now feel one step or two more educated, elevated, and able to share, your expertise and in terms of what has been the impact and the safety of the products, the food products, and so on and so forth. Thank you. There's a hand here. There.
A question for the mayor. Is there any difficulty still today for your fishermen to sell their product in Japan because of the radiation?
Regarding the Fukushima situation, I'm not quite sure, but as far as Iwate Prefecture concerns, and also I think major portion of Miyagi Prefecture concerns, I don't think there's a radiation problem.
They can sell everything that they catch?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, no problem.
Good news for the fishermen of Ofunato. Okay. Question over on the far right.
Actually, I'm on the left.
Well, yeah.
Okay,
sorry.
so I have two questions. One is about climate change, and the gentleman rattled off a list of ecological weather-related disasters. And the first question is, how do we, get people to understand that climate change is real? I think I heard on the radio that out of the last 2 months, December and February, they were the hottest on record somewhere, maybe the whole globe, I'm not sure, but it's real. Climate change is real, and yet half the Congress doesn't believe in it. So that's the first one. Then the other one is about nuclear-free future. Kind of shifting from anti-nuclear to nuclear-free. And things like Stop Trident rally in London, February 27th, with the biggest demonstration in decades in London, yet there was no coverage in the United States media, maybe Yahoo News or Metro newspaper. So that's the second issue of how do we get people to understand that there is a nuclear-free movement in the country. There are peace walks going on right now for months. And thank you very much.
Okay, so I guess I can touch on the disasters and let you guys figure out who's going to answer the nuclear-free question while I talk for a minute. One of the things that happens is that, climate change certainly, I believe, is real and having a dramatic effect. However, events like the tsunami are created by an earthquake. Haiti was created by an earthquake. Nepal was created by an earthquake. So these are not climate change-related events. They're, the natural sort of movement of the earth. So they can distract people to some extent in a way. On the other hand, the cyclone hitting Fiji, low-lying islands, dramatic effect, certainly, influenced by climate change. And I would suggest in a very short period of time, the only way to change people's opinion on climate change is at the ballot box. So, the nuclear event. Ken, I guess maybe you again in terms of a nuclear-free world.
What impressed me when you were talking was Japan's response. They shut down all of their 52 or 50 reactors after this disaster. And they were able to take, it was about 20%, I think, of the power needs. Half of that was met very quickly by just reducing consumption. And so, here's an example of an emergency and a response where they met half of it just by reducing the amount that you're using. I think that more globally, that in a larger sense has to be part of it, because building new infrastructure does take time. The argument we need to keep our nuclear plants, why we transition, there's some logic, because what Japan had to do for the other 10% was to import liquid natural gas at a very high cost, and to this day, because they did not have other resources. So, we need to think about a transition to that point in time where we need energy, and things like renewables, wind, all of these things are going to help. I spent a lot of time studying the ocean carbon cycle and the effect of climate and CO2, the carbon dioxide on the oceans, both directly from pH, temperature changes and things. And so we do also on the fossil fuel side have to stop putting these greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, and those consequences that you alluded to in climate change are huge. Sea level rise, whole nations underwater. And so, everything we do to create energy has a consequence, and those have to be balanced. How best to get there? Ballot box, I'll agree with that. How that doesn't work. I think as a scientist, we give them more information that they will respond, but in fact, studies have shown that doesn't always work. People have already their beliefs. It's almost like you're trying to get them to give up a belief, and that's quite hard to do, in particular when they get politicized.
Well, just jump in with one additional comment on this. The difficulty, and Ken just alluded to it, to answering your question, is that the solution to the cutback of 25% of Japan's power source was in part an extraordinary degree of conservation, but it was also the firing up of other shut down geothermal plants and actually worsening the carbon footprint. So what I don't hear from the nuclear-free movement is a good explanation of how you're going to get to the lower levels of consumption that would be needed until some magic bullet of a new technology comes about. Because the best promotion of solar and wind is going to take years and years and years to replace. And so then we're left with changing our lifestyles, and that's a very hard sell even at the ballot box. So there's a conundrum. It's not as easy as people on both sides of this issue make it sound, at least in my opinion.
Yeah,
that's not based on expertise like Ken. That's just
but I appreciate everybody sharing their expertise, and maybe we'll all thank Ken, Andrew, and Laura. Thank you very much for being with us.